Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Gotham Chess Slow Run. This is episode number 30, and if somehow this is one of the first episodes you have ever watched, I will once again tell you the intro. In this series, I started at 400 on chess.com. I am on an authorized account. They know that I'm using it, and when this slow run is over, everybody that I beat will receive their rating points back, which is only 7 or 8 rating points, basically. We are now 1350. We are now in the 94th, 95th percentile of all chess players. From this point forward, you are really and truly elite. Frankly, you've been elite for quite some time. Every day, really thousands of new people pour into chess, and there is some rating deflation for that reason. But if you're a 12, 1300 player right now in 2026, you are really, really good. And now we will see what it takes to get to the next level. Speaking of, unfortunately, the book's not out yet. Some of you have already written that you've pre-ordered it. It's always going to be in the top few lines of the description. It comes out in October later this year. Be on the lookout. If you're in the UK, we are preparing something with water stones, and hopefully they can ship that over to you in Europe. If you're in Europe, I know that, UK, Europe, yes, I understand, but like legal jurisdiction is a little bit different now, so I use those because I'm not sure about shipping there. In any case, the chess... Oh, I should have changed these before I started. Let's change them now. 1350. And Benji on the other side, 1350. And we will change some of these as we get higher rating. Here we go. Game number 1. I'm going to start things off. And I am playing... Okay, we have no... There's a clock. I haven't had white in a while. I'm going to open with the move e4. And my opponent plays b6 quite quickly. Folks have been enjoying these slow runs quite a bit. There's not a ton of stuff out there right now. Not a lot of tournaments. We're going to go d4. e6 played. And I actually recently faced this in a game. And I played the move a3. Now, that actually is the best way to handle this bishop coming to pin you. Instead of developing the knight and being pinned, you can develop your pieces before you play the move knight c3. And with bishop e7, I do wonder if my opponent is going to play knight c3 and then bishop to b4. That would be very humorous. Really, the best move here for white is probably just to castle, because castling is so flexible. And now we finish up our development. So we can simply get the knight out. We can put the rook in the middle. We can put the bishop. Black is playing very, very solid. And we will learn in this game how to kind of carve up the position if the opponent doesn't go past the third rank and kind of sits there turtled up. In general, your C and F pawns can join the center pawns if you have an overwhelming space advantage. I do kind of like to use as many pawns as I can, if I can, for something like this, because with pawns being backed by your other pieces, you have a much better chance of actually creating a successful attack as they can push forward. Now, at this point, I think this is Black's remaining move. I still haven't developed. I'm going to put my bishop on the f4 square, just purely playing on principles, because if you're 1300, you can't possibly know if you should move your bishop here or here, and if you should move your pawn. Okay, so I'm playing a person who's kind of stalling. Right? They're playing this weird little system. They're not crossing the center line. So what we're going to do after we're sort of done making our improving moves, the final of the improving moves would be to like centralize a rook. This is just good because when the center opens, of course, I'm going to be, activated. And in comes the move g5. Now, I was not prepared for this. This is kind of crazy. So g5, right? Like you look at this and you go, well, if I go here and he tries to trap me, maybe I can just play like h4 or something, or h3. Let's say we just get hit by the whole thing. I mean, my opponent's going to go g4. Now, suddenly I have to come back to d2, and my opponent's going to keep attacking me. This is really bad, right? Well, it's not. So we're going to learn now that the best way to deal with this is to strike back in the center of the board. e5 is probably good. D5, he can block like this. I do think E5 here is a reasonable move. H4, I'm still going here, so I'm going to go E5. Now, if my opponent takes with the pawn, I can take with the bishop, and I would attack the rook. Now, in that position, my opponent could play the move pawn to f6 and actually end up kind of okay. But what's instructive about this position is, well, black is already lost, like basically immediately, simply because they played way too much on the edges of the board. And we have a very simple chop chop here, like a sushi chef, just perfect execution. And then we roll in the seaweed and the rice. We take the knight, because this pawn will be left without a guard. And good thing I put my rook in the middle, because after pawn takes d6, black is completely lost. I also can maybe play queen c2 and attack this pawn. But taking a pawn like the pawn on e6 is absolutely devastating for the black position. With this bishop pinning down this diagonal, you know, the move d5 is also very useful for me. Like right now. Now, I could take this pawn. I could. And I think a lot of you might even be tempted to do that. I'm a little hesitant because I think my rook can be a little bit trapped over there. I don't think it's actually trapped, but I do want to show you how one pawn move simultaneously puts this rook here forever and completely removes a bishop from the game. Black just lost a piece. Not really, but, you know, metaphorically, because they're completely out of the game. Now, with my rook pressuring this, notice I'm still not taking this. I'm still not being gluttonous. One rook eating a pawn that's just not really doing too much and allowing the opponent to get an initiative isn't the way I want to play this. Instead, I'm going to move my most passive piece forward, threatening to take the pawn on d6, which is a massively important pawn for the black position. And because the queen is guarding in front of the rook, black is not actually defending the pawn. The way black would need to defend the pawn is probably to play queen c7, which would activate the rook, because right now the rook is behind the queen. And they do that, which is actually completely reasonable. Now, again, I will show you, well, one really natural move here is queen to d4. This move looks fantastic. It attacks the rook. If you consider that move, that's totally fine. A move that I really like here is this kind of fancy move and a little unnecessary move, rook to c1. I'm setting up a really nasty move here. With my rook and the queen and the king, and this would be the second time a rook tactic was used and better implementation of your rooks in a chess game, I'm threatening the move knight to b5. And after pawn takes, I would simply be winning the queen. And black's position would be falling apart completely. And my opponent didn't even see that. So look, rook, queen, king, right? So knight to b5, if we trade, I simply win the queen. The thing about not trading, though, is you can't move the queen anywhere. Okay, so my opponent just walks into this position, like, super quickly, but I don't really know why they did that, because now they lose the queen. And if they lose the queen, they also lose the bishop, and now they lose the bishop and the queen, so that did not work. And we can take, and now, from this point forward, we got to learn how do you convert a winning position. I forgot which chapter this is in How to Win at Chess Next Level. How to use your pieces is chapter 3. How to use your rooks more effectively. Here, you should win the game within 5 moves. No pressure, but I used to train this with my students back in the day. I'd be like, if you don't checkmate me in 5 moves, you lose the game. Queen a4. 2 ways to win a winning position. Go to an endgame or go directly for the king. Use your material advantage and, like, deliver a mate. You don't even need to take this back. It is mate in 2. I know a lot of you would autopilot this. This is simply checkmate. King c7, rook here is mate in 3. Queen b7 is mate in 2. And that is how, in just a matter of moments, one flank attack by the opponent, we absolutely thwarted it, and we did it because we counterattacked in the middle of the board. So the table of contents in How to Win at Chess Next Level in the next book are, chapter 2 is pawn play, then piece play. Attack is like chapter 5 or 6. Then you have converting winning positions. And in this game, we saw how to use rooks more effectively, attack and counterattack, how to attack a king that's in the center of the board, and that would also be a defensive counterattack because our opponent was attacking us on the flank. So you learn that, and how to use your rooks more effectively to set up tactical situations, as well as converting a winning position. Now, we won that game. I made that game look a lot easier than it was. I'm not going to lie. You know, again, I faced this setup here. You need some pre-existing opening knowledge. If you've been watching the slow run pretty consistently, you are aware that these third rank setups, you should be a little bit wary of the bishop pin. But when my opponent didn't do that, now it's like, okay, well, where do I put any of my pieces? Now, developing your knights, bishops, and putting your rook in the middle is all good. I showed you that in general, if I can get another pawn to help me, I like that because I like to put my pieces behind the pawns. And then my opponent went knight f8 and played g5. This is actually not as stupid as it looks. In fact, the best move here is to go back to this diagonal. I think the move I played completely gets me in trouble. And if black plays h5, I'm in some trouble here. But this is probably incorrect. Now, the move I played in the game was probably not the best move. I think the move, so the best move is to meet the move h4 with the move f4, which is kind of a fun move. So you get 4 pawns into the attack, and then you bring the bishop back, and okay, black can like keep attacking you, but everything is solid here. And if they get a situation like this where their pawns are totally blockaded and stuck, they're not going to successfully infiltrate, provided you don't allow that queen to teleport to the g2 square. Now, I play the move e5, which is not a terrible move. But my idea with the move e5 was relying on pawn takes, and now a cool resource that I actually saw I was going to show you. So if bishop takes, attacking the rook, you would be forced into this position where you would be a pawn down. But you wouldn't be losing. You would be forked here, and you would need to put something on that square to get in the way of the queen. So for example, if you have went knight e4, you would have blocked everything. Black maybe could have long castled here, and this would have been a very tricky game because your bishop is hanging. You probably have to move it. Maybe you would trade some pieces, and still you would be down a pawn. But the position is playable. But I was going to show you that after pawn takes, bishop takes, after pawn takes, we do have a cool move here with white. In the spirit of ripping open the center of the board, you can play d5, which is a very cool move, leaving this pawn here and baiting black into taking like this. And this won't work for black, because now if you try to play f6, you will lose. On the other side of this, you have a king that is wide open, and it's going to be significantly more challenging to get your pieces out of the middle. This position is completely lost for black. Black is a move away from castling, but it's never going to happen. I'm going to play queen e2, and once you long castle, I immediately have ideas to sacrifice my pieces and go directly for a king attack because you just simply took too long to get away. Now, at 1300, are you strong enough to see that? No. But at 1300, this is the best way to meet a flank attack, is to strike back in the center with all your resources. The computer here shows that after h4, this is what I actually had overlooked. After h4, bishop f4, there is no d5, because then I would be losing my bishop. So when I looked at the move e5, I only calculated take and then d5, or at a minimum, I was going to play a position where I would be a pawn down to sort of simulate like, hey, I got caught by a weird opening, but now we have to play on from that position. Now, in general, how did I end up in this bad position? With the move bishop f4. So now you're going to learn before we move on to the next game. This was a very absent-minded move. I couldn't put my bishop on g5. This was just a move like, hey, I haven't gotten my dark squared bishop out. Well, the lesson here is that as you graduate to the level of not always playing on principles, sometimes there are positions where if you castled already and they didn't, and they've kept all their forces back here, this idea of g5 and then h5 is a lot more dangerous than it looks. Black waited perfectly to set up their artillery to hunt down your king and your bad bishop. So actually, and that's the lesson there. Did I know that? Of course. Yes. It's all pawn structures, which I have seen before. Waiting for this correct move is better. For example, here, rook e1 or h3. Waiting, like, hey, is black going to move the knight? Well, then I can move my bishop. Because now there is no pawn to g5. Like, now if they go for this, the bishop's not there. Or at a minimum, like, you can trade the bishop if you want. But really, moving a bishop out with no exact purpose is not so great. You might as well put it in the middle. And then push one of these pawns forward, and it's going to become a locked game. And then the way that it gets locked, like if it gets locked like this, you should push where you are stronger. So where you have a space advantage is where you should commit to the game. Now, that was a massive, massive analysis of a game that otherwise, my opponent allowed me to carve up the center, and then I went d5 and knight e4 and rook c1 and knight b5. And I thought this idea of rook c1, knight b5, showing you the queen and the king on the same line was very instructive. All right, we have black in this game. We played 3 Caro-Khans in the row, and I don't want to play another one. So I will go and play. We have so many requests. I'm going to play a Pierce defense, like a King's Indian setup with D6, with Knight to F6, G6, Bishop G7, and castles. So Bishop D3 is a normal move. We're going to go here and here. E5 is a move. It's not a completely terrible move, but that's why we put the pawn here, so we can just take this pawn. And normally, I mean, I would say, like, move the knight back or move it into the middle. Knight to G4 attacking the pawn is not a bad move. In fact, it's just completely reasonable. It just attacks this pawn, and it's actually shockingly difficult for the opponent to defend it, I think, if we play this correctly. But you can always move it into the middle. So if we go knight to G4, knight to F3, knight to C6 attacking the pawn, my opponent develops with the bishop, we develop with the bishop, they defend with the queen. You know, we can keep attacking it. I think the easiest solution is just to put the knight in the middle of the board. But we can analyze that. This is a weird move. I have absolutely no idea what this does. We're going to put our bishop on G7. That attacks the pawn. Now we can castle or play knight C6. Both are completely fine with me. I'm going to castle. And in general, the plan here is the knight stabilizes the pawn. Oh, I see. Okay. Bishop, yeah, cool. This is the idea. Okay. That's pretty reasonable. To trade the dark squared bishop in a Pirc or King's Indian is very normal. And now I will show you how to deal with this. In general, when I see something like this, one of the ways to deal with this is to move the rook. And after bishop h6, you can actually move the bishop, avoid the trade, and you won't be blundering your rook. The thing about this position, though, is we don't need to react so quickly. So I'm going to go here and threaten to take the knight, which would actually damage my opponent's control of the center. Now, you probably shouldn't take the like this, because you would just be allowing the opponent to get in. I will remove the knight, as the knight could be a useful kingside attacking piece. My opponent takes me, I take back. That was a mistake, by the way. You actually wanted to keep that defended. And now we have this position where I can't really say I'm ever going to be in grave danger here, but still the position is, you know, requires some precision. So I will develop my knight attacking the pawn. I don't think there's anything wrong with that move. Now, giving me the pawn like this is a little bit optimistic, or maybe my opponent missed it completely. So I'm going to take, and they're probably going to go h5. And now we will really deal with the art of defending, right? Okay, or fine, bishop 2e4 is played. So is this a threat? No. The first move that comes to mind here is, can I just play the move pawn to f5? And my logic is the bishop hangs, which makes white not be able to move. If the bishop takes, I activate my queen, and then I threaten knight takes f3 and queen takes f3. And after f5, I don't see any tactic against me. Of course, I can just like bring my queen, but you know, white is going to go here and take and try to activate the queen. So why don't we go f5 now? Now, I can guarantee you after the game, f5 is the top move of the computer. It's definitely the best move. Bishop f5 played in 3 seconds is beyond my level of understanding. I think my opponent thinks that after pawn takes, they can attack me with the queen, but I can just take with the rook. I don't get it. I have to tell you, I do not understand. h5 now, I can ignore it. I can push. I can... And now we will talk about 2 things. Number 1, simplification. Knight takes f3 check, knight takes, rook takes is kind of an automatic move. But I'm going to show you how to take what you know about tactical play and add another layer to it, setting up a tactic, setting up a trap. I see that knight d3 is a fork, but then the pawn could take me. But I have 2 pieces that know how to play like that. So if I play knight to f4, I threaten knight to d3 check, sacrificing my knight to replace it with another knight. I expect maybe white will play queen d1, kind of by accident getting out of that, or like h5 or rook g1, or miss it completely and allow knight to d3. And that is how you spot tactical patterns from a distance. Not queen takes and going for a mate, but like this. And now we sacrifice 2 knights for the queen, and we should win this position pretty easily. So I would bring my queen forward here, let's say to d6. That's an inaccurate move because it allows the knight to jump forward with an attack. My opponent doesn't play it. I could get rid of this. Probably you should trade rooks, right? Like, if I'm going to take it, I might as well trade rooks. Now my opponent has no pieces. They might give me check. Now, you can run anywhere here. In general, you should go to the corner, but that's really general. Like, if there was a knight on f7, it would be checkmate. You generally don't want to run to the middle, but in a position where you have a dominant material advantage, you can run to the middle. This pawn's obviously hanging. I can give this check, which also protects the pawn, and I need to get my rook in the game. And now it will be very easy. Probably what I will do, and I will show you how easy this is, I will go trade my rook for the knight. That's just good advice. Like, you don't have to play like this, but without the knight, there are no tricks. A knight, you could still blunder something. And with like this, you're not going to blunder anything. You're going to go over here, win all the pawns. White is going to go rook g5 and blunder. Okay, or like this. And this is easy now. You take a bunch of pawns, and you can just start pushing. Like, obviously, we don't have a check here. I would maybe go king g7, and then you're going to get checked and be like, wait, why did I do that? And with white, you probably shouldn't resign. Now this is easy. Queen f7 check. And I'm going to sack the queen for the rook and show you that with 5 extra pawns, it's impossible. Sorry, I have 5 pawns to 2. I don't have 5 extra pawns, but I have 5 pawns. My opponent just resigns because they're never going to catch this pawn, and that's that. Now, that game was an example of an opponent who reacted very aggressively to my Pierce defense, my King's Indian setup, and went e5 directly. And then I couldn't understand what they were doing. They went here, which I'm not even exaggerating. I know I'm supposed to be pretending not to know things in the slow run, so you can kind of see how a 1300 thinks, but I was serious. And then I saw this. I was like, oh, okay, well, they want to go here. And this is something that you have to learn the hard way. You're going to have a game, you develop your knight, they go bishop h6, and you blunder here. You take this pawn. That's a blunder because your bishop is overloaded. It's both defending in the middle, and hitting on h6, right? So after knight takes, you take, they're going to win your rook. And that's what's going to happen. You're going to have a game like this. But if you're not going to make a tactical defense, and after, you develop your knight, they go here, you might have a game you take. Now, this would be horrendous. Allowing the queen this much activity near your king is completely fatal. It almost loses immediately. It's actually kind of what happened in the game. Like, had I taken this and then not taken the knight, I'm losing because white goes here and it's checkmate. I mean, it's just mate. So you have to see the attack coming from afar. Now, in the next book, why it's so important for people who are up to 1600, there is a chapter on attacking. And the way I preface attacking is the art. Like, you have to think, hey, if I got 3 moves in a row, how would I deliver a checkmate? And that's what white is doing. White is like, hey, if I put my queen there, and then my knight, and then I push my h-pawn and I opened up my rook, there would be a mate over here. And clearly white is playing like this because they've done this before. So it's important that you keep the tension. Now, this trade for me, removing my bishop for the knight, does 2 things in the King's Indian. It damages the pawn structure. If the queen was here, I would be pinning the knight to the queen. I would not be trying to take this knight if the queen would be taking back, but I am trying to pin the knight and stop it from defending the middle of the board. So that's the way that's the mechanics of the position, is this pawn right here kind of makes the game go for black, and that's a result of my opponent overextending. So that was really the idea of playing this bishop move. And then this position is already lost for white because you traded 2 sets of pieces. The better move after bishop h6 and something like this would have been to take. I would have went knight c6, and then white would have went h4. And this position is much trickier. Although, I would still take the pawn on e5. But in the game, once I took the pawn on e5, h5, could have been played. And here I do have to be a touch careful, because if I take the pawn on f3 with check, which I think a lot of you would be willing to do, the king would go here, and now it's not easy to find a move for black. Because what is white's threat? White's threat is to take and suddenly go queen h6. And if you blunder this, I mean, it's not losing, but it's really close to losing. It's extremely easy. Like, it's a miracle you are surviving here, and there will be plenty of games where it is losing. So, in general, the best move you could say is to play h5, but that, obviously, with us being able to win a pawn, wouldn't make sense. So here I probably would opt to trade the bishop. Now white doesn't have any attacking pieces, and if anything, you can play rook h8. That is one option. That's a very, very safe way to play this. pawn takes, pawn takes. Another option is to bring the queen. Because if pawn takes, you actually can take with the queen and play defense that way. It's not the best move. The computer's not going to love it. See? It's not going to love it because it doesn't like that the queen is a major defender. But actually, if you take with this pawn, it's still very dangerous, right? You got to run your king over here. And I can't really teach you, like, you have to run your king. That's a little bit too insane. Really, this would have been the most practical way for my opponent to play this position. And after that, I would have had to be a little bit creative. And also, really, sometimes if you don't want to deal with this at all, you can simply play h5. Again, not the best. The computer is not going to love this, but this is one way to stop yourself from getting attacked. And now here you would need to play queen d7 and try to break apart these pawns. So you either take the pawn, which is the best move, and go on the roller coaster ride, or you don't take the pawn, and then you know, and here, yes, I mean, I'm looking at the computer now. It's on the screen. Minus 4.3. This is definitely the best move. The others are minus 3 because black's position is so good, but f5 is a very forcing move, and these forcing moves have to come to mind as you climb the rating ladder. I played e4. I'm going to play d4, and maybe we go queen's gambit. Okay, we have a Dutch defense. Very interesting. Now, one of the most aggressive ways to play against the Dutch defense is something called the Staunton gambit, and that's pawn to e4. The reason this is possible is because if black were to take this, we would immediately try to win it back with our knight. There is one trick here that could work in blitz and bullet, which is queen h5 check, pawn to g6, bishop e2. I will show you that after. Now, there is a trap, which is d5. d5 immediately blunders to queen h5 check, and then we take that pawn, and we have a winning position. So the only way to deal with the Staunton gambit is to play knight f6. And after knight f6, bishop g5, hopefully my opponent's not checking an openings course, which is cheating. You cannot do that. Now one of the moves is knight c6 or c6. d5 would again be a blunder. There's some other moves as well. I will know very fast if there is something going. No, e6 is not a terrible move. E6 self-pins you, but it's not a very bad move. But now I can take my pawn back, right? So now if knight takes, there is this. Now we will look at the Staunton gambit a little bit more depth. And there is one line I like a lot against the Staunton gambit, and it is the one that I'm about to show you. So here we take with the bishop. Now, normally you don't want to trade a bishop for a knight so early, but I'm going to explain myself. So we will now develop our pieces, and our knight in the middle is really strong. Anytime we want, we can trade it. But there's actually a variation where you can develop an extremely fast kingside attack. So I just played an opponent who tried to attack me while leaving the king in the middle of the board, right? In many lines here, you can start an attack on the opponent with the king in the middle of the board, but if black starts fighting back against me with pawns, then I have to get my king out of the center. But if black plays like d6, just very solid, very slow, you know, h6, then I can make more moves with my other pieces, like my queen. I can long castle. We know, like, before we commit to a same side castle, if we castle opposite side, we're going to have some very serious attacking chances. It's clear I'm pointing my bishop over there. I have an idea to move my knight. I have an idea to take, maybe replace my knight with a queen and then go for checkmate. Black really should act now. I think the move d5 is very reasonable. Pawn to h4 and trying to get a knight to g5 is also very strong in this position. And I have a yogurt bowl here that I'm going to eat and mute my microphone. I don't know why I'm covering my mouth. I muted the microphone and I'm covering my mouth. Okay, there you go. I actually predicted such a move. I predicted that my opponent might play this very solidly. So now I could bring my queen immediately because I'm ready to replace on this diagonal. Or I can play pawn to h4 and show you how when the opponent castles and you have sufficient development, you can already begin same side attacks on the king side. Because in two moves, my king's going to be out of the middle, and these two pawns backed by two rooks are just going to be going up the board. This is much more possible with the bishop as the primary defender of the king than the knight. If the knight was standing there, it would be blocking these squares. The bishop, however, doesn't block any squares. Now, if black plays e5, these are still probably the best moves. The best way to deal with a flank attack, which is incoming, which is not dire now, is to strike back in the middle, which is exactly what you're seeing. It's an attack right here. Now, the easy move is pawn to c3. To me, that is a very natural, simple move. I don't think I need to think much. I still don't really want to make this trade because I don't want to activate the queen with this trade, which is funny because if you think about it, knight, bishop, like we always have this conversation, right? Knight and bishop. Don't you want to trade a bishop for a knight? Like, no. Now, with this move e5, a lot of things happen. Okay? First of all, there's a direct attack on my center. Second of all, there's an open diagonal. And this is the way I would like you to start thinking about chess from now on. I don't need to acknowledge this now. Of course, the most natural move to me and you should probably be pawn to d5, attacking the knight. But it serves another purpose. Pawn to d5 locks the center. After pawn to d5, black cannot really move the knight anywhere, can't move the bishop anywhere, and the center locks up, which is generally good for the side that's trying to attack. Another idea that I have here is to give a check or something like that, and then to put a knight on g5, like knight to g5 now, one of the two knights, probably this one, and threaten the h7 pawn, and also threaten queen b3 check, and potentially going for the king. The problem with queen b3 check is that the king doesn't actually have to move and allow me to jump in here with a fork. I actually think black could play the move pawn to d5, which is defended by the queen and shockingly annoying. So I'm actually leaning to play d5, because if I take, my opponent takes with the knight, we start trading all the pieces. Let's go d5. The rule of thumb is if you want to attack somebody, you usually need to keep the center closed. And this is keeping the center very closed. If knight e7, I don't even have to defend this because there's all sorts of pins against the king, but I think I can just play c4. I'm not in love with the move c4. I think knight e7, I'm going to go knight to g5. I think that's my idea. Put something on g5, maybe this knight to g5, and then try to go in with my queen. That looks pretty good. The major question for me is, can this bishop come in and spoil my plans? That would be really annoying. Now, moving over here would be losing a knight. Going back to where you were probably isn't the move either. I don't really know what my opponent... Oh, no. That is a gross misunderstanding of the position. I think now white has like a plus 1.5 thing going on. Yeah, knight g5 now, or maybe this knight to g5, because that's actually a threat. And if I move this knight, there's just bishop f5. But then maybe I can play g4. Or maybe knight e6 even. I think this is probably the better one, if I had to guess. But then h6. So there's no easy solution here. Let's move this knight. If takes, of course we're going to activate like this. I think now the only move is either h6 or bishop f5. But the good news about this move is I can start bringing my queen now. And that's going to be a really big problem. Yeah, so now we are going to activate the Trojan horse. That's what I think we're about to do. I think I'm about to go queen h5. And if takes, I take with a pawn and I've kept my king in the middle. And this shows you why exactly you need to keep the center closed if you're going to start an attack. I don't think there's anything wrong with this move. Now, there is a little combo here if my opponent goes queen e8. So queen e8 is very unfortunate because the rook is the only defender. And then I would play knight takes f6. I'm not taking on f6 right now because the queen would come. There was also a very cool move. I could have played knight h7. And if king takes, I would have been able to take with the bishop with a double check. I don't think anybody at 1300 would ever see that. And it's much more natural to also go knight e6, but we're learning about the Trojan horse. King is there, rook is here. If they take, they open up the floodgates here. Queen e8 looking to trade my queen would lose to knight takes f6. Because if rook takes, I take the queen. If pawn takes, I take the pawn. Bishop f5 is another move that would be highly considerable here. It's probably the best move, if I had to guess. And queen e8 is on the board, just like Gotham said, but it is very important that you don't take the queen first, because then the rook will be able to take. And the difference is that in this position, with the overload of the rook, the pawn... What's funny about this is that my opponent resigned and probably is just going to chalk this game up to, I hung a queen in one move. But if you want to get better at chess, you have to take away lessons that are actually correct for why you lost. Black lost this game due to, first of all, not knowing exactly how to play the Staunton gambit. Like, I just taught you a very cool opening. But really, Black lost this game because they played fantastic up until this point with d6 and knight c6. They played really well. But this is crazy. I mean, at least the move knight e7 keeps pressure on my position. And when I went knight to g5, yeah, things got really bad. I went queen h5. What's actually insane is I think I played like a perfect game of chess, which is sort of mind-boggling. Yeah, I played like 96% accuracy, which which just goes to show you, yeah, that was, I mean, like, that was really nice, smooth sailing. I'm not impressed that I managed to outplay a 1300. What I'm impressed is sometimes the positions that I play in these games, I try to mirror more what the level would show, and sometimes I just show you how to crush. Now, that was the Staunton gambit, and you'll notice how, of course, I could have played short castle and just played chess, but this was an example of how to launch an attack against an already castled king, either by castling the other way or by leaving the king in the middle. Knight c6, e5, and here, queen b3 check, d5 is apparently bad. Because now I can take on f6. The queen can't take because it has to guard that pawn. Okay, well, the best move here is to long castle, and that's a little tricky. Now, if I could get the king to h8 and then play something to g5 and then try to go here, that would be fine. But you'll notice that if I wanted to start an attack, I had to lock the middle. If knight e7 had been played, I was probably going to play knight g5 or something like this. And then if bishop takes and then pawn takes, wow, the computer actually just straight up thinks black is better. It doesn't believe in my attack at all anymore because just like in the previous game, black gets to trade all my attacking pieces. So if black had gone knight e7, I would have probably had to play something like, you know, c4 or bishop c2 to defend my pawn. Black would have developed, I would have developed somewhere, and then the game would have just went on, you know? But because my opponent didn't do that, I actually played very well to even, you know, get to this point. Like, d6 was a smart move, you know? Knight c6 was smart. But then here, things went really downhill. This is the Trojan horse. And if bishop to f5, what I was going to do now is consider one of two moves. Either g4, just getting another piece into the attack. If bishop takes, I can actually take with either of my pieces. Both are okay. But another move is just knight e6. So now this is a triple attack. Bishop takes, and I'm threatening a mate on the light squares. Like if queen e7, I'm going to go queen g6, queen takes e6, and knight to g5. Threatening this, pawn takes, pawn takes. There's also the move bishop f5 here, which basically wins on the spot because if queen f7 mate, and if here takes, boom. So that was a better version of the second game. In the second game, my opponent left their king in the middle and attacked me, and I showed you how to not get hit with that. And in this game, I showed you how to attack somebody by leaving your king in the middle of the board. Of course, we could have long castled, but that's how you attack. There you go. Hope you enjoyed. If you've made it this far on the rating ladder, you're in the 95th percentile. Do consider How to Win at Chess Next Level. So many things that are coming up in these games are covered in the next book. And I can't wait to climb more. with you all. Appreciate it as always, and get out of here.